You are being quietly starved to death, and you don't even realize it. Trapped inside a frictionless concrete illusion, you are the silent victim of a spiritual assassination. Discover the terrifying truth of what was stolen from you and the only radical rebellion left to survive it. The vanishing of the sacred, the existential disease of modernity. Stand before the window of any towering skyscraper in the heart of our most celebrated metropolises, and you will witness the greatest illusion humanity has ever engineered. We are perched at the absolute zenith of material triumph, entirely engulfed by colossal commercial empires, blinding neon arteries, and the sterile, unforgiving embrace of glass and steel. Technology has violently stitched itself into the very fabric of our biology, offering a terrifyingly frictionless existence unparalleled in the chronicles of history. Yet, beneath this blinding veneer of supreme opulence, a silent, terminal disease is devouring the human psyche. Beneath these reinforced concrete canopies, we are suffocating. We are drowning in an agonizing emptiness that echoes with one singular haunting question: where has all the beauty gone? We are not merely surviving an aesthetic crisis. We are the silent victims of a spiritual assassination. The inner multiverse welcomes you to a profound journey into the darkest, most carefully hidden corners of our modern existence. If you find yourself questioning the hollowness of the world around you and refuse to accept this terrifying new normal, I urge you to subscribe to the channel right now, as your support is the vital force that empowers us to continue creating these deep, uncompromising explorations into the human condition. Look closely at the world we are now forced to consume. We are trapped in soulless architectural monoliths, barren iron filing cabinets designed merely to store human bodies until they expire. We are relentlessly bombarded by vulgar, cheap entertainment and forced to witness the grotesque spectacle of contemporary art, a dystopian circus where absolute chaos is fiercely worshipped as the new religion of the masses. We have been robbed of something infinitely sacred, and the true tragedy is that most do not even realize it has been stolen. To comprehend the sheer magnitude of this devastating loss, we must cast our gaze back to the philosophical cradle of human thought. Over 2 millennia ago, Plato anchored the human experience upon 3 transcendent pillars: truth, goodness, and beauty. In this profound worldview, beauty was never degraded to a mere superficial ornament. It was recognized as a self-justifying reality, an autonomous force that breathes the divine into the cosmos. When beauty is eradicated, we do not simply lose a moment of visual pleasure. We undergo a violent amputation of our own sacred essence. The absence of beauty is the absolute absence of meaning. The cult of utility, how we measured away the soul. To understand how we surrendered this divine spark, we must trace the quiet, systematic coronation of utility over transcendence. It did not happen overnight. It was a slow, creeping rot dressed in the magnificent robes of progress. At some point in our recent history, we decided that the only things of value were the things we could measure, extract, and monetize. We stripped the world of its mystery and reduced the majestic cosmos to a dead, mechanistic clockwork. I often walk through the financial districts of our cities and feel an overwhelming grief, realizing that every sharp angle and featureless facade is a monument to this hyper-rational tyranny. We traded the soaring, intricate spires of ancient architecture, which drew our eyes toward the infinite and whispered of higher realms, for the flat, oppressive roofs of corporate headquarters, which pin our gaze firmly to the ledger of earthly profit. Nature itself was violently stripped of its spirit, transformed in our collective mind from a living, breathing mother into a mere warehouse of raw materials awaiting liquidation. In this brutal paradigm, human beings were quietly downgraded from spiritual entities into biological machines, valued solely by our measurable capacity to produce and consume. We began to ask what a thing is good for, rather than what it means. And in that subtle linguistic shift, we murdered the sublime. Beauty, by its very nature, is utterly useless to the factory floor. It cannot be optimized. It cannot be neatly graphed on a quarterly earnings report, and it vehemently refuses to be tamed by the suffocating logic of absolute efficiency. Therefore, the architects of our modern age discarded it as a frivolous, archaic luxury. But what they failed to realize, what we are now learning through agonizing lived experience, is that when you remove the poetry from human existence, the prose that remains is utterly unendurable. We have successfully built a world that functions perfectly, a frictionless machine of perpetual motion, yet it gives us absolutely no profound reason to live within it. We are left wandering as ghosts in a machine of our own making, infinitely wealthy in means, but completely bankrupt in meaning. Echoes in the concrete, the psychology of aesthetic starvation. This ruthless quantification of our existence has bred a profound psychological wasteland, leaving us desperately malnourished in the very places we call home. We are currently witnessing an unprecedented epidemic of anxiety, depression, and existential dread, yet we treat these afflictions as isolated chemical malfunctions, rather than the entirely rational responses of a soul trapped in a hostile, ugly environment. I look at the tired, vacant faces of commuters bathed in the sickening fluorescent glare of subway trains, and I do not see a medical crisis. I see the devastating toll of aesthetic starvation. Our built environment is an assault on the senses, a brutalist nightmare of gray concrete and suffocating geometry that constantly communicates a subconscious message of our own insignificance. When you walk down a street flanked by sheer, unornamented walls of glass, the architecture is quite literally telling you that you do not matter, that there is no room for human warmth, narrative, or grace. Historically, craftsmen poured their love, sorrow, and reverence into the structures they built, at carving intricate leaves into stone pillars and weaving stories into stained glass, extending an invitation for the observer to participate in a shared human legacy. Today, the environments we are forced to inhabit are born from the cold algorithms of cost efficiency, entirely devoid of human touch or affection. This is not merely an abstract philosophical grievance. It is a visceral, daily trauma inflicted upon our nervous systems. We are creatures intrinsically wired to seek harmony, proportion, and resonance with the natural world. Yet we are confined to sterile boxes that sever our connection to the earth and the sky. The modern malaise is the heavy, suffocating weight of this disconnection. We feel an aching loneliness even when surrounded by millions of people because the spaces we share were never designed to foster communion. They were designed merely to facilitate transaction. As we move through these barren landscapes, our internal world begins to mirror the desolation outside. The mind, starved of the elevation and awe that true beauty provides, turns inward, collapsing upon itself in a spiral of neurosis and despair, desperately searching for a horizon it can no longer see. Neon idols, the counterfeit beauty of the digital age. In our desperate, starving attempt to fill this aching void, we have turned to the glowing altars of screens and synthetic pleasures. Modernity did not just leave us empty, it ingeniously provided a toxic substitute for the very thing it stole, replacing the transcendent with the transient. We are now subjected to an endless, dizzying barrage of digital hyperreality, a counterfeit beauty that dazzles the eye but leaves the spirit entirely cold. I watch as an entire generation attempts to satiate its profound hunger for meaning by infinitely scrolling through perfectly curated, mathematically optimized illusions. We are consuming a diet of pure, unadulterated dopamine, mistaking the fleeting jolt of digital stimulation for the profound, sustaining nourishment of genuine awe. These neon idols demand our constant worship, fracturing our attention into a million jagged splinters until we can no longer summon the stillness required to perceive true beauty. The tragedy of the digital aesthetic is that it is utterly frictionless and entirely devoid of vulnerability. It presents a flawless, plastic perfection that is completely dead. True beauty always carries the subtle weight of mortality, a fragile, fleeting grace that breaks the heart open and demands a moment of profound reverence. But the algorithmic content we are force-fed is designed only to provoke, to addict, and to extract our attention for the benefit of unseen corporate monoliths. We have traded the breathtaking, terrifying majesty of a starry night for the artificial glow of a backlit display, and we wonder why our souls feel so impossibly hollow. This virtual existence mimics connection and aesthetic pleasure, but it is akin to drinking salt water while dying of thirst. The more we consume, the faster we dehydrate. The sheer volume of visual noise we absorb daily paralyzes our capacity for deep contemplation, rendering us incapable of recognizing the sacred, even if it were to stand directly before us. We are trapped in a hall of mirrors, perpetually chasing reflections of reflections, desperately hoping that the next swipe, the next purchase, or the next fleeting spectacle will finally be the one to heal the terrible, gnawing ache of our modern exile. Reclaiming the divine spark, a rebellion of beauty. Yet, even beneath layers of digital sediment and suffocating concrete, the human heart retains an indestructible memory of the sacred, waiting only for our courage to awaken it. The existential disease of modernity is not an incurable terminal diagnosis. It is a dire, urgent summons for a radical spiritual insurrection. To rebel against the hollowness of our age, we must stop asking for permission from a society that profits from our spiritual sickness. And we must boldly reclaim our innate birthright to the profound. I believe with every fiber of my being that the active pursuit of beauty is no longer an act of mere aesthetic preference. It is the ultimate act of modern defiance. It requires the immense courage to slow down, to brutally sever the cords of our digital addictions, and to resensitize our numbed palates to the subtle, overwhelming majesty of the real world. We must demand more from our architecture, our art, and our daily rituals, refusing to accept the cheap, the vulgar, and the strictly utilitarian. Reclaiming the sacred means planting a garden in the shadow of a skyscraper, choosing to read a profound piece of literature instead of succumbing to the endless scroll, and looking into the eyes of another human being to recognize the miraculous, unfathomable depth within them. It is about intentionally curating our inner multiverse, fiercely guarding the gates of our minds against the relentless invasion of the superficial. We must return to the eternal wisdom of Plato, elevating truth, goodness, and beauty back to their rightful thrones at the very center of the human experience. When we choose to surround ourselves with things that elevate the spirit, when we insist on creating harmony amidst the chaos, we are not merely decorating our lives. We are actively performing the vital resuscitation of the human soul. The sacred has not vanished. It has simply been buried beneath the noise, waiting for those brave enough to dig through the rubble and breathe the fire of meaning back into a dying world. Finally, in our relentless pursuit of absolute efficiency, we have tragically traded the profound for the practical, transforming our world into a hyper-rational machine that excels in means but starves us of meaning. By stripping architecture of its soul, nature of its spirit, and daily life of its poetry, we have created a barren environment of aesthetic starvation that breeds unprecedented anxiety and isolation. To soothe this existential ache, we blindly turn to the digital realm, mistakenly substituting the endless, frictionless dopamine of glowing screens for genuine awe and connection. This counterfeit beauty only deepens our thirst, fracturing our attention and dulling our capacity for deep contemplation. However, the spiritual sickness of our age is not a terminal condition. It is a catalyst for rebellion. The ultimate defiance against a world optimized purely for profit and superficial consumption is the intentional reclamation of beauty, stillness, and the sacred. We must recognize that humans are not mere biological machines meant for endless productivity, but spiritual beings requiring harmony and depth to thrive. By consciously curating our environments, ruthlessly rejecting the sterile and the synthetic, and intimately re-engaging with the fragile, physical world around us, we can unearth the divine spark buried beneath modern noise. Restoring truth, goodness, and beauty to the core of our lives is no longer an archaic luxury, but a vital act of survival, breathing fire and profound purpose back into the human experience. Profound lesson. The human soul cannot be quantified by metrics, satisfied by algorithms, or numbed by infinite digital scrolling. When a society prioritizes absolute efficiency over beauty, it ultimately loses its humanity. True joy, meaning, and psychological peace reside in the unquantifiable, vulnerable, and sacred elements of life, things that cannot be optimized, but instead demand our absolute stillness, presence, and reverence. Practical application. Implement intenti signate specific analog hours in your day where screens are completely turned off. Replace the habit of doom scrolling with activities that require sustained attention, such as reading a physical book, journaling, or quiet meditation. Curate physical beauty. Actively reintroduce aesthetic and natural harmony into your immediate environment. Plant a garden. Bring flowers into your home, seek out beautifully crafted physical objects, or spend time walking in nature without the urge to capture it on a camera. Embrace useless moments. Stop trying to monetize or optimize every second of your existence. Allow yourself the luxury of engaging in activities solely for their intrinsic value. Listen deeply to a piece of music, admire the architecture of an old building, or hold a deeply present, unhurried conversation with a loved one. A question for you. What is one simple non-digital thing in tea brings you a genuine sense of beauty or peace? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below so we can all read, reflect, and gather inspiration from one another's perspectives. If you found value in this video and want to explore more deep, meaningful topics, please hit the subscribe button. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating high-quality content for you in the future.